readers come with assumptions. So if you, and their assumption is default our world unless specified otherwise.
Right.
So whenever you're going to change anything big about our world, like, you're going to change a piece of history, you're going to add magic, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, whatever you're doing, the faster and earlier you can communicate that to readers, the better off you'll be. Because otherwise they're going to insert their assumptions into the story, like on a global level. You're going to say the word kingdom and they're going to assume it's a standard kingdom. Then it turns out that actually this is kingdom used very loosely because the ruler is elected, blah, 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 blah. And then the reader goes, but none of that. I don't know any of that, and then you start getting issues.
Releasing your inner dragon. All right, so I think we have another victim laid out on the slab for us today. This one seems a little anxious. They've been waiting for a while. Have they been poking us like, hey, when are you going to slaughter me? It's like the cow, just that annoying cow sitting there like, I'm just tired of living. Just put a piston through my head, man. Come on, look at all this meat.
So we do actually have a queue at the moment with our edits, which I do not mind at all. Please don't take that as a sign to stop sending them. Keep sending. But it does mean we've taken a little while to get to everybody's edits. And of course, the other problem is we've both been sick for 2 weeks, which isn't affecting the audience so much. They only had 1 week's interruption where we were, both down and unable to edit the episode.
Awful about, because we're finally back and we've got episodes in the can. So we're like 4 episodes deep. And because also our video editor is my youngest son. I say youngest son. Remember, I'm really old, so he's an adult. He's a child to me, but to the world, he's legal to do anything and everything. But he was also sick. So and my wife is sick right now, so it's just kind of rippling through the household as these things do.
Yeah, no, my partner was sick. My partner was sick as well, so it's been that way. So anyway, so the long story short is that we haven't gotten to this chapter, and it's been sitting on my laptop going like, remember, the first thing you need to do in the next session is this edit.
Well, I mean, we should also, as awesome as it is that people, are willing to send us their work and have this stuff done, we're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, which means we probably have 3,000 or 4,000 people that watch, off and on, because you're usually at about 20-25% subscribers versus, people who are doing it. So I guess I should say that, hey, how about a subscription, man? Like, you're squeezing off of our knowledge, and you couldn't just click a subscribe button. It costs you literally nothing. But anyway, so eventually we are going to get to the point where we get too many we just won't be able to do all of them. But, it is something that's we love doing, and it seems like the audience loves them a lot. We get a lot of feedback on them.
Yeah, the audience enjoys them, and that they make for good content. They make for good discussion points, and people like the practical experience. But you're right. At some point, we will receive too many to reliably, get to them in any kind of sequence. And at that point, we'll figure out something with wildcard draws or something equivalent.
Yeah.
But we are not there yet.
No.
Today is not that day. So let me share my screen.
We're only almost popular.
Almost. Close to popular. Okay, so this is labeled Chapter 1, The Pale Color of Innocence.
Getting out my red pen. All right.
Okay, so as per usual, I'm going to read, and then we'll stop and discuss as inspiration takes us. Zev watched the 3 sisters waltz across the night sky. The blooded sister led the way. Waxed with the world, her warm presence brought increasing tones of red to the few clouds above them. On her heels, the lush sister danced, all full and round and ready to burst. She dominated the other heavenly bodies. Her vibrant light caressing Zev exposed skin, similar to a doting mother. I'm going to finish the paragraph and then talk. Lagging behind, the pale sister was at the end of her waning, weak, almost out of breath, knowing she would soon be sleeping, recuperating her strength so she could spring forth from that dark slumber once more. Okay, as an opening, I am not averse to this. There's the filtering in the first sentence, but it does establish who our POV character is, so it's fine. I would have liked a different thing from watch, maybe some kind of emotion or something like that.
Right.
But
so I'm going to push back on that because you're right.
Yeah.
It does give us, okay, we're in Zev's, if that's how you say that. Zev. We're in
I
Zev's
assume you
POV.
pronounce that X as a, I'm assuming you pronounce that X as a Z.
I don't know. It's good. We can go with Zev. I don't have anything better.
Okay.
But here's the problem. Remember, so with filtering, what we're really doing is we're talking about sentence structure. So we're talking about diagramming the sentence. We're going to look at our subject and our action. So in that sentence, Zev watched the three sisters waltz across the night sky. The subject is Zev, and the action is watched. So now that's the most important part of the sentence is what we're telling the reader. Reader, look at Zev as Zev is looking at something cool, but don't really pay attention to what's being looked at. And sometimes that is I never say never filter. It's not about never filtering. It's about understanding that you're controlling what the reader's looking at. And we want the reader looking at the night sky. We want the reader looking at the moons, and because there's some beautiful imagery in here. But the problem is that opening sentence, we're saying, don't look at that. Look at this character. And we're only doing it for the simple reason that you said, to establish who the POV is.
And I think that we can achieve it better by breaking Zev out into his own sentence, because we can establish an emotion that Zev is feeling, which will help the reader feel the emotion as we're looking up at the night sky and seeing the three sisters.
Yeah.
So instead of watched, I would perhaps go something like,
well, I would
sense of awe filled Zev as he gazed upward.
That works. Where I was going to go was one of the last couple of workshops that I did in the writer's room. I can't remember if it was this month or last month, but the workshop was all about scene starting. And I really pushed them to think about, there's 4 things we want to do as quickly as possible in every single scene. And we want to do it in the first paragraph, first, second paragraph, first, 1 through 3 paragraphs, but we want to get it as fast as possible. All of these. The first is whose head we're in. Well, bam, we've got Zev right in the first word. So obviously, we can check that off the list. Where are we? I would not check that with this, because we have no idea where we are. We know where the moons are, but we don't know where we are. The third is why? Why are we here? And we don't have that either, unless you want to say, well, it's to watch the moons. But we don't know that Zev is there to watch the moons. We just know that Zev is watching the moons. And so that's different from why. So we have no motivation for the character of why Zev is here. And then the last is the hook that makes me want to continue reading. Now, I would put a check mark in that because we have some beautiful imagery. We have these 3 interesting moons that have a life of their own. And I do believe that's enough of a hook to make it interesting to keep reading. But we don't have where are we and why are we? And so
I'm going to push back on the hook part.
No, that's subjective. I'm saying that's for me.
No, I hear you. I hear you that it's subjective. But here's the thing. For me, the character's motivation and the hook work best when they are the same thing or close together.
Or at least connected to the character.
Yeah, in some way connected 100%. To the character.
And that's where I do want to differentiate. If this was chapter 7, that hook is fine. Oh, wow, we're learning about these moons. I'm already invested in the story, blah, blah, blah. For chapter 1, I will agree with you. It's way too weak of a hook to make me want to continue reading. Like if I was doing the look inside on this, I don't know. Writing is so bad these days, and this writing is good enough that I may continue reading just because.
I'll continue reading past the paragraphs I'm in, because
Yeah,
I'm willing to give a book at least a page and a half of reading, right?
right,
And unless there's grammatical errors will annoy the crap out of me.
right,
And I'll get to one that I picked up that did annoy me, but I'll get there. I would like a little earlier an establishment of why
right,
Zev is watching the moons.
right. And that's where I was going with. Well, instead of
It
just
doesn't have to be huge.
right. Well, instead of just this opening
Yeah.
sentence, which fixes the filter. So what you did here absolutely 100% fixes the filter, and it makes it more emotional. But I would actually take a
Yeah.
step back. I would back up maybe 3 seconds of time and establish not only that I'm in Zev's head, but why am I here? Why is it important to me? So that I'm prepped for what we're going to experience with these moons rising. Why am I here? And so, because readers aren't connected to moons, they're connected to characters.
Yeah.
And so while
Yeah.
the moons are beautifully written, I really think it was a missed opportunity just to spend a short paragraph, and it doesn't have to be more than 2 or 3 sentences, but Zeb pulled his coat in tighter around him to ward off the chilly night as he walked through this thing, and he's thinking, whatever we do, we don't have to take a lot of time with it, but
I mean, we obviously we can't write that because we don't know what his motivation
right,
is, which
exactly,
we'll get to.
exactly.
I do want to highlight one sentence that isn't right, or at least hits me as not right. I don't know. I'm not a huge grammar, I'm not, the English grammar person, but I'm pretty certain that her vibrant light caressing Zev's exposed skin,
Yeah, no,
similar
it's
to a doting mother, is not a correctly constructed sentence
no,
because of the ing.
right. Yeah, they went with a tenseless verb, and that should be a past tense.
Yeah. So it should be her vibrant light caressed.
Yes.
Also, I'm not sure I like similar, but that's just because I don't like similar as a word.
Right.
I would just have
Yeah.
said her vibrant light caressed Zev's exposed skin like a doting mother.
Or with the warmth of a
With the warmth of a doting mother or something like that.
yeah, or with the coldness. Like, I mean, obviously we would not use doting, but with the
Yeah.
compassion of a doting mother. I mean, because it might not
Yeah.
be warm. And so
Yeah.
even though I threw warmth out there, I don't know if I would.
But yeah, similar is just similar is one of those. It's like
It's
seams. I don't
it's
like the
weak.
word seams. And they're
Yeah.
like, but it's not really a hurricane. Yeah, well, sure. Go away. I don't
Yeah.
care.
And then one of the things that I wanted to talk about was on 13. I
Yeah.
am a huge hater of wishy-washy words.
Yeah.
We're writing drama. And so like on 13, weak, almost out of breath. So even though we are we're like, yeah, but they're not really out of breath. Yeah, but also the moon doesn't have breath. So it's just so much stronger to write weak out of breath. Like it just
Yeah.
paints such a more definitive picture that captures the imagination a little bit more than the wishy-washy, almost, kind of, sort of, like it seemed to be.
Almost is like started, like began, like
Yep.
then, like if you've written it 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to say always, but 9 times out of 10, you don't need it.
Yeah.
It's just a weak verb or a weak word that you put in because the other words that you chose weren't quite correct. So now you're just modifying words.
But it's actually 2 ways, because you're right. It's sometimes it's because you're modifying that you chose wrong. So we would need to strengthen the other words. But where I'm talking about here is where you're just not. We talk kind of in this passive way, and so what you're doing is you're adding this passivity to the words, like weak. It's almost out of breath, because and that does paint a picture, but with the picture that we're trying to paint with this moon waning is the end, like that last few steps before the finish line, and you're just exhausted, and you don't know if you can make it, and that almost just isn't as dramatic. And so for me, it's about the word. So like, you're right. Sometimes we add the word because it strengthens the words behind it, and we should just use stronger words. But in this case, it weakens the words behind it.
Yeah.
And they don't need
100%.
to be weakened. We need to paint that, gasping its last breaths of life. That
Yeah.
is going to be much more powerful of the imagery that we're trying to show here, and almost just kind of deflates it.
Yeah. Then this paragraph as a whole, I feel like it goes on a little long. And this is a little nitpicky, but I do feel like these 3 sentences all more or less say the same thing.
They do, and especially with the word choices. So like my next thing was going to be the next line, knowing she soon would be sleeping. Knowing doesn't give me a lot of emotion to this, and since we're trying to personify these moons, it would be really nice to have, instead of knowing, which has no emotion attached to it, some type of verb that brings, if we're going to keep them. You went the other route, which like, do we really need this? Could we cut it? Okay, great. But if we are going to keep it, we could do something, weak, out of breath, begging for the slumber that she so deserved, or something like that. So we get this emotional attachment to it as opposed to just knowing. So if we are going to keep it, then I would like to see, and then same thing with recuperating her strength so she could spring forth from the dark slumber once more. That's all factual stuff, as opposed to, something like, desperate to regain her strength so she could spring forth once more. There's
spring forth from the dark side.
This is what I talk about when I'm teaching verbs. When we're talking about verbs, and both me and you have said many, many, many times, verbs are the most important word in your sentence. There is no more important word. And the biggest reason that they're so important is because verbs aren't just actions. They are, and if you use them like this, knowing and recuperating and stuff like that, they are just actions. But the beautiful thing about writing in American English is that we have 30 words that mean the same thing, but they don't mean the same thing, because even though they mean the same thing, each one can come with a different emotion, or a different sound, or a different smell, or a different taste, or a different, cognition, or a different imagery. And so choosing the right, just by changing verbs, you do this. I mean, just look what we just did here. Instead of knowing she would soon be sleeping, begging to be, sleeping. And now we have this begging comes with this desperation emotion, this desire, and none of that is in that writing. It's just in the verb. Just that verb brings that with it. And then same thing here, desperate, or longing to regain her strength, or whatever. All of these verbs are going to be bringing in this extra layer of subtext to these sentences. And then I think that if my opinion is, maybe if we used stronger verbs through here, you wouldn't see this as this doesn't really add anything. It's just, it's all saying the same thing, because we would be bringing in all these new tactile and visceral and emotional things with these sentences, and you'd be like, oh, this is, you know what I mean? I'm guessing, but I'm assuming that you might not see them as egregious.
To a certain extent. There would probably still be a limit, like I would probably pick one of those 2, what I mean? Not both. But yeah. But I mean, the imagery is good. So far. There's some good imagery going on here. I would like to understand a little more why these moons matter so much.
Well, and after that discussion, I want to go back and and those were the most egregious, and I wanted to start there with those. But if we go back and we really start taking a look at some things, so waltz across the sky is actually kind of cool. That gives it. But like led, so if we look at our verbs, led the way, brought, there's a lot of very weak words in here that we really could take advantage of, and we already talked about similar to and everything like that. We have some good, like the vibrant light caressed her exposed or his exposed skin. I don't know if it's a guy or a girl yet. Oh no,
yes, it's a guy, I think.
There's just some opportunities, and verbs again. I don't want to go into every single one of them, but I just wanted to kind of point it out. Now that we've had this discussion on verbs and the importance of verbs, we can look back, and while there are some good verbs in here, there are also some pretty weak verbs. Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
it is Zev is a he.
Yeah,
but I would also get that in
So,
sooner.
and I mean, verbs are really critical.
Yeah.
That they really are the center point of your sentence. So it's worth taking a long, hard look at them.
Yeah, because other than the one typo, the thing is well written.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume that that's just typo because they haven't made that mistake anywhere else. When somebody does it, like
it probably used to be attached to a previous sentence and then got broken out into its own sentence and left in a
yeah, that happens to me all the time. But like so during the last workshop, when everybody's reading their samples that they had written, there was this one girl who started off and she had verb tensed in the opening paragraph, but then it was just solid third person, past tense, past tense, past tense. And I was like, okay, it was just a typo, no big deal. But then it crept back in and it popped up here and it popped up there. And I was like, oh yeah, no, this person is struggling with holding tense. So
yeah,
I'm going to assume that this is a typo, because you're right. That's happened to every one of us, where we write a sentence that we are like, and then when edit mode, we're like, oh, let me change this around. Let me break this up. Let me move this here. And then you just forget to change the tense of a verb. And it used to be the correct tense, but now it's not, because, I mean, just like when you had to, up in the opening paragraph, you had to change a tense of verb if we're going to expand that first line. So, we had to go from, no, it's the opening line where you.
Yeah, it was up here.
Yeah. So instead of waltz, which was correct verb tense there, we had to add the ed on it to make it now, because we chopped that sentence out.
Absolutely happens to everyone.
So, and then the last thing I do want to say is, because I touched on it just now, not only do we want to get that Zev a little bit better, but we do want to have the he in there, especially since we have a lot of she's. We need to make sure that, because here's the thing. The reason why this is so important, this is one of my Drake-isms. Stories are written one word at a time. You get the word a, and that leads to the word since, and that leads to the word of, and that leads to the word aw, and hopefully it will eventually form a coherent sentence, and hopefully there'll be a couple other coherent sentences along with it to create a coherent paragraph. That is the way the readers are painting it in their brain. And this is where you have the difference between the head book and the paper book. When the writer starts writing Zev, they know Zev is a dude. They know it. It's in their head. They know this. But that's your head book. If I have to wait to line 18 to find out that I'm in the head of a dude, and I've got all these female moons, I'm very apt to paint Zev as a female. And what that does to me now is that I have to go repaint everything that I just painted. And when you make that mistake over and over and over and over again, it just keeps pushing the reader further and further and further away from your story, because they're constantly have to rejigger what they've already kind of created in their mind. And so we don't want to wait to paint this stuff, because if you don't give it to them, they will make it up. No one's just going to go Zev, a floating ball of light.
Yeah.
Until you give me details. They're going to create those details in their mind. And so like the solution that you picked, which was, a sense of awe filled Zev as he gazed upward. Bam, got it all. It's not that hard to get that information into the reader so that they are grounded. You paint what you want to paint, you paint it quickly, and you move on.
Yeah. It's also, it just ties into what I also say about world building is readers come with assumptions. So if you, and their assumption is default our world unless specified otherwise.
Right.
So whenever you're going to change anything big about our world. Like, you're going to change a piece of history, you're going to add magic, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, whatever you're doing. The faster and earlier you can communicate that to readers, the better off you'll be. Because otherwise they're going to insert their assumptions into the story, like on a global level. You're going to say the word kingdom and they're going to assume it's a standard kingdom. Then it turns out that actually this is kingdom used very loosely because the ruler is elected, blah, 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 blah. And then the reader goes, but none of that. I don't know any of that, and then you start getting issues. So when you bear in mind that the reader assumes, so you need to, if it's something that you don't want them to assume, get in there fast. And especially with men and women characters, or whatever gender these are, if you have some weird science fiction gender or whatever, you have to establish that fast, because that is one of the very base assumptions that readers come into, because that's part of their identity. So
yeah. Scroll up to the top again. The peanut gallery is actually a really interesting question that I kind of want to go through.
Yeah.
So talking about the first sentence, and I don't know when they actually typed this in, but they said, what if we switch the two sentences? I'm just going to go with this one here, the added a sense of awe filled them versus the three sisters nights through the walk sky. So first of all, this is subjective. Whether you want to start off, the three sisters waltz across the night sky, a sense of awe filled Zev as he gazed upwards, or somebody else, even a different person from the peanut gallery, wrote, the three sisters waltzed across the night sky above Zev as he, and then, pulled his coat on or whatever. Here's the thing. It is subjective. You can do it either way. But to me, and how I always do it, is almost every time my opening sentence is in the head of the character that is narrating, because I want to establish that running. I want to come out of the gate. If I kind of imagine it like, a horse race where the gates open up and the horse goes running out. Well, that horse with the rider is the narrator, and they're in something. They're in a track, they're in a field, they're in a whatever. But some people do like to open up in more of a omniscient kind of way.
So I'll tell you what my what my feeling is. I would actually not flip the sentences, even though I am not as, for me, it's okay to start a little differently, to maybe start with like the scene or whatever. Like, I'm okay with that sometimes. Mostly I agree that it's good to establish the character and so on, but sometimes there are reasons not to. But I wouldn't in this case flip the sentences, and here's why. We're going to be looking up, and we're going to be looking up at the night sky now quite extensively, because there's a lot of description. What you don't want to do is you don't want to look up at the night sky, look down at the narrator, look up at the night sky.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't feel like a smooth scene progression. You want to go, I'm in the narrator, I'm looking up at the night sky. All one smooth motion, not I'm looking up, I'm looking down, I'm looking up, I'm looking down.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what I was basically saying, is that, for me personally, I like to start it off, but it's also different between opening a scene and opening the first scene.
Yeah.
And so I'm even more conscious with that first scene. And that first scene, in my opening paragraph of every story that I write, I don't think I've ever not started in the head of the narrating character right out of the gate. The only times I'll do that is there's a reason for it. It makes sense. It actually is more beneficial for the audience to have something else going on, either because I want to confuse the audience, because maybe the narrating character is confused or whatever. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's funny. If you look at if you go through most of my stuff, not only do I start off in the character's head, in the first sentence, and I just grabbed, I happen to have Carnage Across sitting next to me, and I didn't even know, I don't remember, but the first word is Einar. Not only do I usually start off in the first sentence in the POV's head, usually the first word of the first sentence, and this is in almost every scene, not just in this one. So chapter 1, Einar of Clan Demalak pushed his way through. Here's chapter 4, Einar followed Ostri as they queued up. Here's chapter 6. See, now this one doesn't, but now I'm in chapter 6. When they reached the landing hall between the Hall of Galrida and the Great Hall, the sounds emanating from above warned them that they were no longer alone. So I'm starting off, because in the last scene ended with them sneaking up to danger. And so now I'm starting this chapter with the danger. Grunts, growls, and the occasional smashing of furniture trickle down, sending ice slicing through Einar's veins. So I'm still bringing him in that opening chapter. But the last chapter just ended with them having to sneak into places that they think might be very dangerous. And so I'm going to start off that. But if
I
you
will
notice,
also say, just purely from a starting perspective, I do prefer to start with a character doing something actively. Like I wouldn't, like I made it a sense of awful Zev because it was a better opening sentence that I don't know enough to write an active one.
right, 100%.
But I would generally prefer to have the character actively doing something because it establishes the protagonist nature.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So that's just something to think about. I'm very, very particular on the very opening sentence. So you get a lot of people that are like, oh my God, the opening line of your sentence has to be this most amazing line that has never been written before and captures the soul of the reader. And it's like, I'm not that smart. I don't do that, but I do capture you into the moment. Like I'm not gonna, very rarely, I don't think I've ever written an opening line that is just like this great American novel line opener that you read the line and you will never stop reading because that line so encaptivated you. I'm like, no, but I do connect you to the character very, very fast and usually right in that opening line. And then, I don't know. I'm not a fan of the whole thing. Although I do want to break. I'm gonna do our
Sorry,
our
that
first.
heels is spelled wrong. It's
It is.
heels.
Yeah, good catch. I don't
My
catch a
eye
lot of
fell
typos.
straight on it, and I was like, "That's not the right heels."
Yeah, I don't. As a dyslexic, that's my weakness is typos,
Yeah,
especially homonyms like that. I think they're called homonyms, whatever they're called. Anyway,
homonyms. They
I'm gonna
are
break our
homonyms.
first commercial because I should have done it a couple times because we organically did it because we mentioned a couple things. So if you don't know, we're doing I'm doing a 2-camera commercial, but I only have 1 camera. So, and if you would like to join us and be a part of the peanut gallery here in Releasing Your Inner Dragon, you absolutely can watch us do this live. We do it every Thursday morning from 9:30 until usually about noon, and that's Pacific time. So for Marie in Finland, it's much later. But all you got to do is join the free area of the writer's room. So if you just go to writersroom.us, the link is down below. You can actually join for free. Although right now we are doing 50% off for the first 250 members. So if you want to get 50% off for life in the writer's room and work with me on a weekly basis with daily writing sessions, weekly critique groups with both me and Marie, and classes and workshops and all the other things that I talk about that I'm working on with people in the writer's room, head on over to the writersroom.us and you can join and be a part of all of this fun, good writingness. So see you in the writer's room. And I'll turn back to our camera.
Okay, so let's pick up again from line 16. Though she was not the dominant one, it felt apt that they were dressed in the colors of her pale light. At least that was what Zev thought as he considered the thin robes they wore on their final night at the cusp of adulthood. Not quite the yellow-tinted white he associated with bones. There was too much of a blue undertone for that. Okay. So this is not necessarily something that a reader would pick up, but this paragraph was nails on a chalkboard for me. Not because the word choices, but it contains a lot of my triggers. It felt apt.
Right.
Really? What does that feel like? What does it feel like? What does it felt apt feel like?
Right.
Then we have was, we have were, we have was. There we have another was. This is it's like a wasp nest of to be verbs.
Yeah.
And then we have at least that was what Zev thought that
Yeah, there's a
comma
comma.
is grammatically incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't need the
So
comma.
I want to fix this paragraph very badly.
But
What's your thoughts?
here's the problem that I have with it. I don't know what I'm supposed to be painting.
Mm,
I am lost in this paragraph. Um, and maybe it's just me not being smart enough to follow this paragraph, but though she was not the dominant one, it felt apt that they were dressed in the colors of her pale light. Okay, I get that. We're talking about the other moon. The other
yeah.
moons are actually being overshadowed by the colors of the first moon. Great, awesome. At least that's what Zev thought as he considered the thin robes they wore on their final night on the cusp of adulthood. That I don't understand. We've got one of
Oh,
them.
I do. I do.
One of them's
He's saying
waning,
that they're waxing full, and they've got like they've got little small rims around them. I guess
but I got who's waning?
she's at the end of her waning. Yeah, it is a little
But that's
contradictory,
lagging
but
behind.
yeah,
So no, the first one. So go up and see. This is stuff we don't want our readers thinking about.
yeah. So the
So
blooded sister,
the blooded
she's
sister led the
waxed.
way,
Yeah,
and she is waxed.
yeah.
The thing that's waning is the second moon.
The third moon. The third moon. So on the blooded sister, the
Oh,
lush
okay.
sister dance.
All right.
There's the lush sister, and then there's the pale sister.
Lagging behind, right, is the
Yeah.
third
So
sister.
it's blooded, lush, and then pale. And then the pale is not dominant, but they were dressed in her pale light. At least that was what Zev thought as he considered. See, I guess the thin robes they wore could be the two front moons who are both nearly full. Because
Yeah,
they're
but why?
waxed.
So since we have a pale sister, so who's pale light? First of all, so we went. Are we talking about the pale sister still?
Yeah. Yeah, because this is the last she, right? Was the pale sister, though she was not the dominant
Yeah.
one.
So I don't. That's what lost me is I don't understand how a waning moon that's weak and out of breath and not dominant is actually casting her light on the two other moons, one of which is waxing. Like that's why I'm like I don't know what
Actually,
to paint here.
if you want to get ridiculously overly complicated, I don't understand how a moon is casting light, because all moons are actually only reflective
Yeah, but the
of
reflective
the
light is casting. So if we had multiple moons, you know,
No, but I mean they can only reflect the light of the stars, right?
right,
They're rocks. So, but that's me being very,
right. But
very
if we have
nasty
a
and
blood moon,
pedantic.
red moon here and a pale moon over here, there's going to be times where maybe they're on opposite sides where
Yeah,
the sun hits the blood moon and then that red light comes over here and hits the pale
yeah,
moon. But I don't. That's what I mean. I've lost the ability to paint this because I don't understand where the light is coming from. And here's the
yeah,
problem when you get specific. I love specificity. However, when you get specific, you have to be very, very careful of, again, what I call the head book versus the paper book.
mhm,
In this writer's head, they see all of this stuff. They see where the light's coming from. They see how this pale moon is somehow the light from the pale moon is affecting these other two moons, even though you've just told me that the other moons are bigger and this one is barely a sliver. And
mm,
I I've now lost the ability to follow the logic. And so my problem is that now I read that paragraph and I'm no longer thinking about Zed or whatever
Zev.
Zev or why Zev is there or what Zev is concerned about or anything like that. I'm actually now trying to figure out geometry of light reflection. And that is
Yeah,
not what I feel like the reader should be thinking about. So
yeah,
this paragraph has completely botched me and confused me. And some of the other peanut gallery was like, yeah, there's there's I'm confused too. So it's not just me, but now I'm trying to think geometry
yeah.
and I'm not
No,
thinking story anymore.
it's definitely a confusing paragraph. Like, and
Yeah, and that was so another peanut gallery person said, I thought the robes might have been something Zev was wearing, and I did too. That's why I had to reread it. And it's like, no, they're just like
yeah,
robe. Um, And then it made me start
my
thinking
other
that maybe,
problem is this paragraph and the next one. Okay, the imagery around the moons was pretty, but I am now a page in,
yeah, and
and
we're
I
still
have
talking about the moons. That was my
no
next
idea
note.
why these moons are important or what they do, and that's too much.
Yeah,
Even in really pretty prose, even if I could follow what's going on,
yeah,
give me a reason.
yeah, yeah. That's my next note, was that now I'm 4 paragraphs deep reading about moons, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
Again, the why is so important, and since we don't know why Zeb is here, we don't know why, what Zeb's motivation is. We don't have any type of hook that gives that makes us go, okay, yeah, no, this is interesting. I need to burn through this moon stuff so I can figure out what's going on. There's
Yeah.
nothing that's holding me to this story, and then this paragraph just throws me out, and I'm just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I would probably put the book down after this paragraph, because while the decent writing above kept me interested, like, oh, okay, so this person can write. That's nice. They actually can hold an image. There's a couple typos, but whatever. I can overlook typos, and sometimes I don't even see them because of my dyslexia.
Yeah.
But then I get here and I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to get me to paint now. I am completely lost, and I don't like that feeling. I don't ever want to be lost when I'm reading, and so therefore there's a billion books out there, and I'll just go to
I'd
something else.
I'd put it down at the next paragraph, but that's a personal.
Well, let's find out. Let's go to the next paragraph.
Instead, it was more like fresh snow, watery crystals, as if they had donned their purity, their innocence, pieces of cloth still unmarked by the filth of the world around them. A symbol of how the adults viewed the teens said cloth clung to, the sweet lies they told themselves, he mused. And I like that catches me on a bad spot where I'm not a huge, like, I don't know if that's what the author was implying, that like adults look at teens with like lust. But it's kind of what I took from the paragraph, and
Oh,
it just
I
like that kind of freaks me out.
I took it as that the adults were looking at teens like they were morons. But then again, I have teens, so they're morons. Um, Not all teens. I'm just saying mine.
Yeah, yeah.
Technically, they're no longer teens. They're actually even past that.
And I mean, like that, like I have issues in like I know that I that's also specific to my baggage, but it would probably throw me out, like me personally.
Yeah, I don't get any sexuality from that. It's just me. And again, everything's subjective. So that's the
Yeah.
thing. We talk about this in the writer's room, where I say you can never argue with someone on what your writing makes them feel, because it
100%.
makes them feel that. Like, that's just the way it is.
The thing is, people come into the book with their own baggage.
Yeah.
Things that they've experienced in life, and their own view on culture and whatever, religion, etc., etc. So you have no control over how how that baggage is going to react with your book, right? The only thing you need to watch out for is like if 30% of people react negatively, like if 30% of people read this paragraph and said to you, it feels like, then
Yeah.
maybe reconsider. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But
But if it's just me,
that's why I always say Drake's rule of 10. You
yeah,
get 10 people that don't care about you to read something. And if less than 8, because we want, if 7 or fewer say something, or if in this case 3 people say something, you don't want that, because that puts you below a 4 out of 5 stars. We
yeah,
want 8 of 10 people to like it, or only 2 people to feel like, if 10 people read this and 2 people are like, wow, that feels like the adults are very sexual toward their teens, and the other 8 are like, I don't see it.
yeah,
Then I'd probably go with it,
yeah,
because, then you're down to that 20% mark, and, whatever, it's subjective. You're never going to bat 1,000. But
100%.
right now we have a sample pool of 2, so 50% of us think that does.
Yeah. So don't listen to me. I'm just saying like what
Well, I'm just saying,
what
if this was
what
our
my
sample pool size, this would
yeah,
be a 2.5 stars
yeah.
sample pool size. So you have to.
Well, I don't know that I'd story. I'd probably just put the book down. Like, and I mean it. Yeah, yeah. I have issues. I have hang-ups. So there are things I don't like to read. So
Yeah. So from the peanut gallery, somebody says, yeah, to me, it reads like the adults are lying to themselves about the teen's purity, and she has no idea what that has to do with the moons. And the other one agrees the way I see it, which is that the adults are envying the teen's purity, that the adults have become dirty and corrupt and filthy or something like that. So, again, it's subjective. You're never,
yeah.
everything you write is going to be subjectively consumed by the audience, and you never know what that is. But you want to
And
go,
and I'm also highly unlikely to be your target audience, like
yeah. Well, you got to go with so like one of the very first writers groups that I ever ran. So this is many, many years ago. This girl read, and it was just this scene. It was an opening scene of her fantasy book, and it was a brother and sister, and they're out in the field, and they're just kind of working. They're working the farm.
yeah.
And I always go last. That was my rule back then. It's still my rule because I want the other members to try to get as much as they can before I come in and kind of clean it up. And so everybody went. Nobody mentioned this thing, and so it got to me, and I was like, so brother and sister are, and I said the naughty word for it, but I said they're intimate. And she was like, what? And everybody's like, oh my God, I'm glad you said that. Like everyone in the room was thinking it. And I was like, oh yeah, no, they're definitely boning. Like there's no way they're not doing that. And she's like, what are you talking? I'm like, look at how they're flirting with each other. That is flirting. And she's like, no, it's just brother, sister. I'm like, no, like that is hardcore sexually charged. And since everyone else felt that way, it was like, maybe you want to think about their interaction with each other. Because it wasn't just me, it was like all 10 of us in the room that were like, yes. I was thinking, I didn't want to mention it. I didn't, it was that, because it was a new group and everybody was still kind of on, pins and needles about what to say and what not to say and everything like that. But I don't have those problems for some reason. I just say what I mean.
But yeah, you do need to be so for me, the reason why this paragraph sketches it is because it feels like there's some connotation here with like oh, teenagers should keep themselves pure, and I'm
Right.
like,
Yeah, no, I
it
mean, I can see where
it
you go with it.
it it
Um,
feels of it tastes of sexual control to me.
yeah. So you just the point here is to say it doesn't matter what you think when you write your stuff, and it doesn't matter what you get out of your writing. When you start testing it out and you get other people to read it, it matters. Now, if Maria is the only one who reads this and is the only one who feels that way, and everyone else is like, I don't feel that way at all, then you're probably pretty safe. You may want to tweak it, you may not. It's up to you. It's, at the end of the day, your name is on the product. But in the case of like that first writing group where everyone felt that there was a lot of sexual tension between the brother and sister, that if they weren't intimate at that point, they were definitely going to be at some point. Then you might want to think about, even though you didn't feel that you wrote it that way, you may want to seriously consider redoing that. So that's the point is that, and I say this all the time.
Unless, of course, you are George R. R.
Oh,
Martin.
right.
And
Yeah.
that
I
was
mean, if they
Jamie
are going
insists,
to boff, then
in which
then
case,
you've nailed it.
Golden. Well done.
Yeah.
Game the whole family can play.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is what I say all the time. And this is something that rubs every writer wrong. And I'm sorry, but it is the fact. Writers do not get to decide if what they've written works. Because you're not the target market. You're not the person that's going to pay for it. The only people that get to decide if something you've written works is other people. If they think it works, then it works. If they don't think it works, it doesn't matter how much you like it, how much you thought it was good, how much you thought that you'd have written, literary gold. If no one else agrees with you, then you're wrong. Plain and simple, because you as the writer it's not even in your wheelhouse to decide if something that you wrote is good. You don't have that ability. You don't get that deed. It's not your job. It's not in your skill set.
For
Period.
you as the writer, of course, you're going to look at it and be like, of course it's good. It's
Right.
I look at everything I've read and I'm like, it's fantastic. Of course, of course it's fantastic. I wrote it.
Yeah,
Come on.
exactly. But that's not, you don't even have that ability. It's
Yeah,
not even a skill that you own.
yeah.
So you have to take feedback from others. That's why I always say, it's why the writer's room is so important. You have to be a part of a group that is a critique group. You have to both critique others, because critiquing others, the reason why do me and Marie critique other people all the time? Because it makes us better writers. Like, we're
Yep.
not doing it just because we're, saints and trying to, spend all of our time bestowing
Looking
all this greatness upon everyone else. We're doing it because it makes us better writers.
looking at other people's writing, improving other people's writing helps me improve my own. It
Yes.
helps me see the same issues in my own writing.
And then you must also get critiqued so that you see your writing through other people's eyes.
So I okay. So I do want to just read like up to here.
Okay.
And then I'll
We got
explain
time.
why.
We still got about 10 more minutes.
Okay, so while the Pale Sister weakly danced across the sky, Zev followed the current of her matching youngsters as it was pulled in the wake of the druids, guiding them up the side of the hill, toward the stone structure at its apex. Flames swayed along the worn path. Twitching guards barely kept the encroaching darkness from overwhelming the passers-by. The crackling of the flames and the buzzing of the insects filled the merciless silence left by words that died before they could escape the lips of those among the pale procession. The mix of dread and anticipation thickening to the point where Zed felt he could have grasped and held it, if only he bothered to reach for it. Why didn't you start with this? Like, yes, the moons are important, but there's a ritual going on here.
Yeah.
There's druids and people doing stuff, and they're guiding the moons.
And now when I look up at the moons, they
It
mean something
matters.
to me.
Yeah.
They're not
Like,
just 3 cool moons.
yeah. Because
Again, that,
until we got here, it meant like it was just pretty imagery, which was why I was all like, why are we focusing on these freaking moons so much?
yeah.
Start with the stuff the characters are doing. Attach me to the character. Let me understand what's going on around the character before you show me the cool fantasy element. I promise you, the character will keep me more invested than the fact that the world has 3 moons.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just going back to what we said. It's connect us to the character, connect us to the, everything like that. I mean, we have some more wishy-washy weak writing. So we've got a couple ly adverbs in there, weekly and barely, down on 5. So both of these, so there's 3 ways that you should never use an ly adverb. One of the ways is the way these 2 are used. We're going to use a weak ly adverb because of the fact that we're using the wrong verb. So while the pale sister, we couldn't say while the pale sister danced across the sky because that's too strong. It's too strong of a verb. So we have to either weaken that verb with an ly adverb, or if it's a weak verb, we have to strengthen it with an ly adverb. Or we could write, shuffled, stumbled, lurched, floundered, faltered,
I like
wobbled.
floundered.
Yeah, whatever. There's a bunch of words we could use to replace that so that we don't have it. Same thing with barely keeping. So I'm down on 5, into 5, last word. So there's other words we could use. And so again, we can't write twitching guards keeping the encroaching darkness from overwhelming because that's too strong because they're not actually keeping it or whatever. So we have to come up with something. And that's just that. And then we have another felt in there. Just so you know, mine and Marie's rules are you should never use feel or felt in prose. I will give the exception to sometimes if you're actually feeling something tactile, like I'll let that slide every once in a while if it's the right word. I don't think Maria's as gracious on that word as I am.
I am not gracious on feel or felt. It has to be perfect. It has to be the perfect word for me to even consider leaving it in prose. I'll leave it in dialogue, but in prose, it earns its keep like 5 times over.
Yeah. Yeah. In dialogue, you know, people say all the time, you made me feel bad. You know, whatever. That's it's dialogue. Dialogue is dialogue. But
You
in
hurt my
prose,
feelings.
you hurt my feelings. So yeah, I mean in dialogue though, I mean in narration though, feel and felt should just never be used. They're just so telly, and they're always telly, and you can't get away from it. So just kind of, yeah. So twitching guards braced against the encroaching darkness from braced against the encroaching darkness. We'd have to rewrite a little bit, but yeah, saving
the passerbys or whatever.
Passerbys from being overwhelmed or whatever. Yeah, you are right. This is kind of what we were talking about earlier. We start with something closer to this, and now we have whose head are we in? Where are we at? Why are we there? And what is a hook? And so
things are moving around us. There's an actual ritual going on. We're a druid. There's like flames and encroaching darkness, and we're guiding the moons. And then we look up at the moons, and the moons are amazing and in context.
Yeah. And this is going to go into, so the next episode is the point of view episode. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about it in ways that I don't think anybody else is really covering. But this is what we're talking about here are for limited POVs. So we're talking about third person limited or first person. So if we're in a limited POV, meaning that the story is limited by the knowledge of the narrating character, the character is an unreliable narrator. They only know what they know. And so they are limited in what they can perceive. What we're talking about is, and that's what it feels like that this person is trying to do. The problem is that so few people understand point of view. Everyone thinks they do.
Say, even in Omniscient, I would have started with a procession.
Certainly. But, well, maybe. Omniscient, you know, it depends on what we're doing. We need to establish the voice. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons. But here's the problem. People don't understand point of view. They just don't. They think they do, and they think they're doing it, but they really are kind of doing this muddied, wishy-washy mixing and melding of like a pseudo omniscient and a pseudo limited. And then you get this stuff. You get this weird, and it's because that's the way a lot of novels are written. And a lot of novels, I mean, it's, you know, there was a time when that's all that there was out there. And so, you know, people equate success to process. And I always hate that. Like the industry truly believes that Hunger Games was successful because it was written in first person present tense. It ain't got jack all to do with that. That has nothing to do with why it is. But then they went out and bought a whole bunch of first person present tense stories because they were like, obviously, process is why it was a success.
She could have written those books in third person past tense, and they would still have been successful.
Yes.
Because she maintained one hell of a line of tension.
Yeah. So, but that's what the industry, and so it bleeds over into the writers, where writers start equating process to success. And so they go, well, you know, when you look at the big books from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they're all kind of written in this way. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that that's why they were a success. It doesn't mean that you can't improve upon that. And so in the next episode, which for us is going to be in like 5 minutes, for you guys will be next week. We're going to go into point of view, and hopefully you'll join us for that. Just
to finish up here, like, I genuinely feel like this piece has got some strong writing. Yeah, the author has a good grasp of creating an image.
Yes.
Right? Some of that moon imagery was really lovely. All right. But what you want to do is you think that your moon imagery is the strongest part of your writing, but it's not. Yeah. And this is the thing that a lot of writers struggle with, especially when they're starting. They think that the prettiness of the writing is going to sell the book. There are a very, very few, very rare exceptions where that is true. People who write prose so beautiful it could be poetry. I'm not one of them. You are very unlikely to be one of them. Okay, those people are like poets rare. Okay, and poets are rare for a reason, right? Like poets who make money out of it are rare for a reason. Because it is really hard to write, to actually craft the words that beautifully. So what readers are, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be a good, successful writer. You're going to be a good, successful writer by getting people to read your book because of the character, because they attach to the characters. Bring in the character early. Establish why the prettiness of the moon matters. And then use your very good prose, your good imagery creation to add the silver to it, to wash the whole scene in color and give the reader a reason. They've gone like, okay, I like your character enough to keep reading. Now give me the fantasy thing.
Yeah, and oh look, you can also write. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, and I struggle with this because I work so hard to write immaculate prose. I mean, I don't know of any other writer who pushes himself as hard on prose as I push myself. You're a close second. But I'm insane with it, and it slows me down. And that's the crappy thing about it, is that I'm not a fast writer because of how insane I am on every single word. But what rubs me is that I know that a beautifully written book versus just a book that's horribly written but has a great story and great characters is going to sell the same amount of books. Because again, readers concerned about character and story. Like that's the thing that, can you write a good story? Can you write a good character? And I do write good characters and good stories. And I know that because I have the success that I have. But I also, and it's probably because of my dyslexia, and it's probably because of my lack of education. It's probably because of, my I don't just have low self-esteem, I have self-loathing of my intelligence level on, because I'm dyslexic and all this other stuff, and just being raised in the 70s, and, we didn't have dyslexia, we just had stupid. And so I know that I have these demons inside of me that I'm always fighting against. And that's what drives me to have to do this stuff. But the reality is character and story. Like that is what the readers want. That is what matters. And they'll overlook so much other stuff. Now, I do also believe that the quality of writing that I put in is the reason why if you're into fantasy and you read my stuff, you are, I have over a 90% hook rate. I'm at 92, 93% hook rate on anybody who reads my work. Because not only do they get the good character and the good story, but they also get this amazing writing. And so that really doubly hooks them in. And so I do believe that the good writing does help my career.
Of course. But it's not, it doesn't matter how hard you push yourself. You are not going to sell your books on prose.
Right.
Like,
and for those, and we need to do this for you too. I don't think we have done this, but for those who do want to check out my writing, if you go to Starving Writer Studio, so Starving Writer Studio, all singular words.com/Genesis, you can actually download the first 70,000 words of my next novel for free. For the cost of your email. It is a marketing thing. But you can check it out and you can see how I craft now it is fantasy and it is epic fantasy, so you have to be into that, but you can check it out for free. And so that's about the first Harry Potter book was only like 76,000 words. So it's almost the size of the first Harry Potter book. So I would encourage you to go and check that out and download that and kind of see how I craft was. Because I mean, you are listening to mine and Marie's advice. It seems like hopefully we can deliver on that advice in actual product. So head on over to Starving Writer Studio, links below, /Genesis, and you can pick up the first 70,000 words of that for yourself and check it out. We need to get something like that for you.
Sure, I can. I mean, I've got some stuff.
Because the fourth book is out or coming out.
No, I've actually just written the end of the fourth book.
Yeah, I knew it was coming.
But it's now got beta reading and editing and so on. I hope to publish it by the end of this year, and that'll actually complete the first series, the trilogy in 4 parts.
I do have a couple of signed copies for sale over on Starving Writer Studio.
Yeah.
So if you want to get signed copies of the Sangor Chronicles, the first 2 books, I don't have the others, but Marie came a year and a half ago to Comic-Con with me, and she left some of the copies here. I actually took I should have taken more, but I think I only took 3 copies of book 1 and book 2 to Comic-Con with me this year. Sold them all on the first day. Like, all gone. So haven't had a chance to do all my accounting and everything like that, but I do owe you some money. Because first day sold all 3 copies. And so that was nice. Now there were 2 people that were waiting on them, people that are fans of ours that were like, did you happen to bring any of Marie's books? Like, matter of fact, I did, but I should have brought more. But I think I've got 5 or 10 copies of each left. So if somebody would like to get those and not pay shipping from Finland, you can head over, and she makes all the money. I don't take a penny of that. So come on over and get those from Starving Writer Studio.
Okay, so I think that more or less covers I think what we want to say about this critique. Like, I do really want to emphasize and re-emphasize this to all of our listeners. Start with a character. Attach me to the character. Motivate me for why the pretty fantasy scene matters by attaching me to the character and their motivations and their emotions. And after that, I am on board to read about your beautiful moons rising over the thing.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, because the writer's got a solid base. They understand prose, a couple typos, whatever. None of us can get away from typos. Mostly good imagery. There was that one paragraph that threw me for a loop. I couldn't follow. But for the most part, everything was good. So, yeah.
All right. And I think that's a good note on which to end this episode. And we will see you soon for another one.
Bye. If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Marie Mullaney, your co-host on this literary adventure. Our goal is to provide you with valuable insights and discussions on writing. If you believe in our mission, please like and subscribe our podcast. Sharing our episodes with your community not only helps us grow, but also contributes to a richer, more diverse conversation about storytelling. We appreciate your support. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.